Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes, and a very happy Friday. You might have done a double take if you saw the New York Times front page news analysis today. The paper of record headlining its lead story online, quote, "Health law rollouts stumbles draw parallels to Bush's hurricane response." Of course, Obama's Katrina is such a lame, played-out right-wing meme that it was already a Daily Show punchline all the way back in 2010. Daft, semantically bankrupt phrase you hear anytime anything goes badly in America since 2009.
It's been called Obama's Katrina.
Is this going to be Obama's Katrina?
President Obama's Katrina.
It's crazy. It's like no matter what happens during the Obama administration, there's the perfect Bush up for the occasion.
Could health care be Obama's Iraq?
Is this, as some are suggesting, Barack Obama's Enron?
Unemployment rate from 9 to 11 could be Obama's 9/11.
Are we now watching Obama's mission accomplished speech?
They've got their, brown heck of a job brownie moment.
This is Obama's my pet goat moment.
The crazy part is, it's conservatives and Republicans that are in the biggest rush to make the comparisons. Remember that terrible thing that Bush did that we fought for 8 years to convince you wasn't bad but actually good? Well, now we use those very incidents as the low watermark for your guy.
The Katrina comparison specifically deserves a 5-second rebuttal. You do it by showing this handy chart from Media Matters of deaths in Katrina compared to those from the Affordable Care Act rollout. So no, New York Times, not Katrina. Obamacare is very much its own thing. It is a long, brutal battle to make a little more real the promise of a decent society for all. If you're anything like me, you've watched the last several weeks unfold with a potent mix of rage, frustration, and exasperation. And I will confess that as I follow the coverage and immerse myself in the stories here at the studio every day, I find myself pissed off at just about everyone. I'm angry at a White House that failed to properly implement the single most important law they've ever passed, or that anyone has passed in a generation, that handed their ideological and political enemies ammunition, which they are now gleefully firing off at anything that moves, including stalwart progressive allies and politicians who backed the White House and vouched for the law with voters. For those of us on the single-payer left, the entire spectacle is particularly maddening, since many of us spent years noting the drawbacks, complexities, and Rube Goldbergian nature of the entire Romney Care mandate and subsidies model. Those of us who worried that without a public option, insurance companies would use the law to manipulate and panic consumers. Those of us who worried about that, but ultimately embraced and celebrated and rejoiced at the A.C.A. as a massive step forward on the long march for justice. I'm also angry at a mainstream media that, due to a combination of gullibility, privilege, and sloppiness, has managed to elevate the stories of a very small sliver of the health insurance market into a national panic, while largely allowing the names and faces and fates of the millions of poor people who will be denied health care by Republican governors to remain anonymous and untold. But most of all, I'm quite simply appalled as I watch a Republican Party and conservative movement not even pretend to hide their glee and schadenfreude over problems with a law they have done everything in their power to sabotage, destroy, and discredit. A law that, at its base, attempts to make sure that tens of millions of our fellow citizens are delivered from the terror and anguish and hardship of a morally bankrupt status quo to a modicum of security and care. Jonah Goldberg, writing in the Conservative National Review, just comes out and says, quote, "If you can't take some joy, some modicum of relief and mirth in the unprecedentedly spectacular beclowning of the president, his administration, its enablers, and to no small degree liberalism itself, then you need to ask yourself why you're following politics in the first place. Because frankly, this has been one of the most enjoyable political moments of my lifetime." I read that and I thought, what the hell is wrong with you? That's why you're in politics? That's why you follow it, to point and laugh at beclowning, to work out some weird adolescent inferiority complex? I mean, don't get me wrong, it's bracing to see conservatives stop pretending to even care about the plight of the people they were pretending to care about for expedience sake just a short while ago. This is true. Even conservatives I like, even Philip Klein, a conservative reporter I like and respect and follow, he tweeted this today. Great news from Alaska. Parnell won't expand Medicaid. This is how it's done, John Kasich. Great news. No health care for up to 40,000 poor Alaskans. That is great news for conservatives. Those of us committed to a humane future of mutual support and solidarity and compassion, that is what we are up against. And finally, I'm angry at Democratic politicians who are starting to go wobbly.
It's really disappointing to all of us, to the people that we serve, that it hasn't been rolled out better.
There are provisions that need to be fixed.
Many Americans don't feel well served.
I have been frustrated from day one.
I will never forget the morning of January 20th, 2010. The fight for health reform was not over. The House's more liberal bill still needed to be reconciled with the Senate's more conservative version. But Scott Brown had just declared victory in the special election to replace the late Ted Kennedy, and that cost Democrats their filibuster-proof majority in the Senate. I was walking on Capitol Hill to my office, and there was this horrible, depressing blanket of quiet. It felt like the day of a funeral. I ran into a member of the Progressive Caucus from the House, and he was walking on the street. He looked like he'd been crying, stumbling around in a daze, and he just shook his head and said, "Well, it's over," and walked away. What happened next, from what I've been able to report myself, is basically that Nancy Pelosi met with her caucus and told them to get it together, that they would pass the law as is, no matter what it took, and for Democrats tempted to abandon the mission, she and others reminded them it was too late to distance themselves from the law. Everyone had already voted for the thing. The same is true now. There is no separating yourself from this law. That goes for all of us on the left. If you think the A.C.A. can go down and leave you unscathed, you are sorely mistaken. We are all on the same boat. This law has had near-death experiences more times than I can count. I've covered a dozen of them, and it's not just bad luck or that the law is cursed or the people pushing it aren't good at their jobs. It's because it's hard. Healthcare is 20% of our economy. There are trillions of dollars on the line, and shareholders and companies and workers and doctors and medical device manufacturers and hospitals and patients, people. Healthcare is something every single person uses, and every time, in every country, a society has decided to reform the delivery of it, it has been done against the kicking and screaming and sabotage and backlash and rage of entrenched interests and reactionaries. There is a reason almost a century's worth of presidents and Congresses tried and failed to pass health care reform. There is a reason passing and maintaining the Affordable Care Act has been so arduous, because it is the most ambitious piece of social legislation in this country in a generation. And so amidst the deserved criticisms and bad press and the undeserved hysteria and shameful gloating, one thing is clear. The only path left for those of us committed to the goal of health care for all is forward. No retreat, no surrender, no going back. The only way out is through. This won't be the last battle. Others will come, and there'll be more after that. And there's never, ever going to be some calm, final equilibrium where everything works and no one's trying to take healthcare away. There is only struggle today, tomorrow, forever, because nothing worth doing ever came without